Hello, welcome to another Bible Fellowship group. Glad you're here with me today. I am not going to call you sinners and brood of vipers like John the Baptist did last week, but he did give a great challenge for us last week about how if you're going to be called God's people, we have to live godly lives. And today Jesus takes it a step further. For last week, we learned about how John the Baptist was like, if you're a tax collector, don't take more than you should. If you're a soldier, don't take bribes. Basically, last week was like almost just, if you're going to be one of God's chosen people, like just live a decent life. Well, Jesus is going to take it a step further today in Luke chapter 6, starting verse 27. It's a very popular passage where he tells us just to love our enemies. And that's going to be a very challenging lesson for us today, to love our enemies. What does that look like, and what does that mean for us today? So diving right on in Luke 6, starting verse 27, it says, "But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To the one whom strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from the one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either. Give to everyone who begs from you, and from the one who takes away your goods, do not demand them back. And as you wish that others do to you, do so to them. If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. And if you lend to those with whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amounts. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the ungrateful and the evil. Be merciful, even as your Father is merciful. Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured back to you." So right there, Jesus gives us an incredibly challenging passage to love our enemies. And this is another one of those instances where Christianity is incredibly different than other religions. Because other religions say love people, but to hate your enemy. And that is pretty much almost what every other religion teaches. But Christianity is incredibly unique when it says to love your enemies and to do good to those who persecute you. And when somebody takes something from you, give them actually more. Like, I read that and that bothers me. Because I like things being fair, to be perfectly honest. I love fair. I hate cheaters. I'm a huge baseball fan. And during the steroid era, I was very upset with everything. My favorite player is Ken Griffey Jr. Thankfully, he was never accused of steroids, but if he were, he would no longer be my favorite player. And so like right there, like that's just, as me, I'm a person, I like fair. I don't like cheaters. I don't like when people get away with doing bad things. So I read this passage when it says, pray for those who abuse you, turn the other cheek. When somebody takes something from yours, give them more. I read that and I'm just like, that's not fair. That's not right. How is that just? But then I'm also reminded how incredibly lucky I am that life isn't fair, that life isn't just, that I deserve hell myself. And if life were fair, that's exactly where I would end up going. And so just as grace has been and mercy has been given to us, we have been called to do the same. And that is an incredibly challenging message for us today. Is the reality is, you're right, this isn't fair. This passage is not fair. But thank God he isn't a God who cares about being fair, because otherwise we would be in deep trouble. And so that has helped me tremendously during my life reading this passage, because every time I read it, part of me still cringes there. It's like, I don't like it. But as Christians, we are called to obey even the parts of scriptures we don't like. And so going on to verses 32 and 36, Jesus explains, like, if you're going to be good just to those who are good to you, and if you love those who love you, you're just being another person. Like, even sinners know that. Like, that's just common human decency. People, as human beings, we are just created to desire love. And so, even in our fallen state, we understand that. So, just to love those who are on our side and to those who do good to us, and only do good things when we expect something in return, that just makes us no better than anybody else. And as human beings, we so often try to make ourselves feel like we're better than others. It makes us feel good about ourselves, let's be honest. And we are charged to fight against that. And so if we're going to be called Christians, if we are going to represent Christianity in a way that is different than other religions, we are going to have to love the unlovable, to do good to those who don't do good, because that is exactly what Christ has done for us. And especially today, now, in what's going on in our country, I very much try to avoid politics. But right now, both sides are not looking pretty when it comes to this passage right here. There are people on both sides of the aisle that are teaching hate, that are teaching dissension, that are teaching these people are good and these people are wrong. And people who teach that, they are disobeying God. So whatever your political party is, I hope we can agree on that at least. That there's enough embarrassment to go around for everybody in America today. And as the church, when we hear people proclaiming, speaking out on hatred in the name of whatever, whether that's God or nation, as Christians, we must speak out against that and condemn that. For that is not what God desires for us. So, are we willing to love our enemies just like God was willing to love us? And for me, I always remember there's a guy in high school, I won't say his name, but he was kind of the school bully a little bit. I avoided him. And something I always said in high school is like, well, I'll forgive him once he asks for forgiveness. Pretty much, I was not loving him. I was trying not to hate him. I was like, okay, I'll just avoid him and, we'll just go on life. But he means like he's nothing to me. As long as I avoid him, don't do anything with him, like, okay, that's fine. And I thought I was being a good Christian during that time. It's like, well, I'm not seeking revenge. I'm not like actively trying to hurt him or anything like that. But reading this passage, when it's to love, if you're going to say you love somebody, you can't just do nothing. And so I remember when Jesus, I don't know why, like you hear this all the time with Jesus on the cross during Easter, and he says, Lord, forgive them for they don't know what they do. And I had heard that so many different times, but for whatever reason, it didn't hit till college. It's like, that is not the same mentality I gave to that student, that classmate of mine. And so it's a challenge for us today. A lot of times we're like, well, we'll just coexist, but we'll just nothing people in a way. That's not being Christian either. And it's very challenging. It's a very difficult lesson for us today. But it's something we need to remember and we need to constantly challenge ourselves with. Like, are we loving our enemies? What does that look like? What does that look like in your life? What does that look like in my life? What does that look like at work, at home, with family, with in-laws? Like, what does loving your enemies, loving those who persecute you, loving those who are difficult, what does that look like? Because ultimately, as those final two verses there, 37, 38, it says, judge not that you will not be judged. Condemn not and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. And it will be given to you. And I love this part. It says, good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over will be put into your lap. So imagine, especially back then, if you had a scale, that's great. But a lot of times it was, okay, put this things like in this jar and I'll put this in this jar and we'll swap, kind of a deal, like trading, essentially. When he says being pressed down, it's like God is like, okay, this is what I am giving you. And I'm going to take it and I'm going to press down and put as much in my jar as I possibly can. Squeeze it tightly together to where it's overflowing. And I am going to give that to you and just put it in your lap. And that is what God's going to do for us. And so our challenge is are we going to say we're greater than God where we don't have to do that? Because God, who is much higher than us, did that for us. And so if we're going to say we understand that, we're going to have to do that to other people. And that's so difficult and so, it can be stressful even. But that is what we're called to do. And the reason why in our Bible fellowship groups we jumped from John the Baptist to John 6 now, we're actually going to go back next week to earlier in Luke, is because this is actually Sanctity of Human Life Sunday, to where it's an emphasis for us, to a reminder for us that we live in a society right now where, unfortunately, abortion is a reality. And we as a church at Trinity Baptist, we very much believe abortion is a sin. And there are many, what ifs people always try to defend. It's like, well, what if the mother's a rape victim? Or what if the child, what if? But here's why this passage works so well with that. It's because we're called to love the unlovable and to defend the defenseless. And so we as Christians, yes, we are very pro-life because we believe that ultimately God is a God of love, and we believe in redemption. Even in the worst of circumstances, the worst of stories, God can redeem that. But when you take away that baby's life, then the redemption is taken away, for you have ended the life. Once death happens, you're off in eternity. There's nothing more after that. And so it's a challenge for us. Are we going to love our enemies? Are we going to love those who disagree with us on this statement? A lot of people view it as a political debate. I view it more as a spiritual one. But for those who disagree with us on this, are we still going to love them? Because they're clearly hurting, and especially those who have chosen to get one. And so I pray that we as believers will be willing to show that mercy that God is able to give us, and to extend it to even those who aren't able to defend themselves. Let's pray. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for this passage. Lord, thank you for being a God who came down and loved the unlovable and forgave the unforgivable. Lord, I pray that we will be an extension of that love to a hurt and dying world. Lord, I pray for those who are in our country right now, who are living in fear, who are living in anger and hatred, that you will open the hearts and minds of the people of this nation, Lord. Lord, I pray that you will bless us with blessings that we have to give back to you, and we have to recognize that everything we have here on earth is a gift, and therefore we should be willing to give it back. Lord, thank you again for all that you have done for us. And in your name we pray. Amen. Thanks, guys. Hope you have a wonderful day.